once we come from this whole grill of names, our mind frame is very name centric. 200 words, 150 words, 250 words. Our mindset is structured like that's how the muscle memory works, perhaps. Introduction, body, conclusion. And that is probably not well suited for your personality test or commonly known as the interview. And I personally felt this in 2021, where midway and the big, I'll come back to why that happened with me, but through the interview, I realized my answers were becoming very lengthy. And I myself consciously was trying to cut the answer, but because it was being lengthy and I was forcing myself to curtail the answer, it was looking very so as to abrupt. And many a times, even the board members were cutting me short because even they realized my answers were very lengthy. And in that year, I got the lowest across my interview scores. And I realized that, that is a big problem. Now, coming to the point of how you try and correct on that. See, what happens is we have a lot of knowledge, or even if not knowledge, information or data or stats, whatever you would like to call it. So whenever a question is posed to us, and if it's within a comfort zone, and I think we should be mindful that most of the interview is very cordial. They pose very simple, analytical, and many times direct questions. So we jump to the occasion. The stakes are very high, like I've always mentioned, and we tend to overperform at times. And that's where we kind of dig our own graves, because then they just want the answer. They don't want an essay out of us. So when they ask you like something like, what is your name? It's very natural that we'll only tell our name. But then if they ask you to like tell us something about yourself, then you might go about your name, family, educational background. So where do we draw the line? That is the main question of articulation. In certain questions, when they ask about just say a particular issue, like we can go to the example of the Israel-Palestine conflict as it's happening in Gaza. Now, if they ask you about the present conflict, I mean, means what we would do, we'd probably go back to the Balfour Declaration, starting one line introduction on that, 1948. You give examples of certain UN resolutions, the various movements, intifadas and all that. But then in interview, that's not needed. Perhaps they are only asking for the contemporary issues as it stands today. And if they might just, come back with what is India's position or what is your position on that. Now, when they ask you your position, if you start going around 1917, 1948, 1956, Yom Kippur War, it defeats the purpose of the question. So one thing is our mind frame should be such that we are only answering the demand of the question. And that question is not a means question. It is not 150 words. It's not 200 words. It's not 250 words. It's at max. If obviously depending upon the question here again, if many of it, of the answers is very circumstantial. It depends on how the person is asking as well. But if you go more than 3-4 lines, then you have to understand that it's not a personality test. Then you are probably giving them too much information. You should never do information overload. So always try and make the answers brief, concise, to the point. Okay. That is number one. Brief, concise, to the point. Secondly, I think we should have the best choice of words. Like the same thing, the same idea, if you want to pitch forth, you can do it in 2 lines or you can do it with 4 words. I mean, examples are so many. Like if they ask you a certain thing about, again, coming back to the Israel-Palestine conflict, you can say the same issue in 2 lines, or you can just reduce it to 4-5 words about just India's, if you want to give India's stand on it, you can just say India's non-aligned movement to strategic autonomy, rather than saying how over time India's thing has changed. India used to initially do this, now India is doing that. I mean, we're just making a paragraph in which we can just use the words non-aligned movement and strategic autonomy kind of words. So keywords, those choice of words, that really helps shortening the answer. Now, understanding the demand of the question, I think, becomes very important, because what we tend to do, and subconsciously, I think it happens with, if not all, most of us, is when they ask a question of a particular topic, we rather tend to answer what we know rather than what is being asked. As soon as they hint on a topic, we like our mind goes through those particular notes that we've made about that particular topic, and then we try to recollect the us page mein kya likha tha, and then we try to blurt out those words and subtopics. Then your answer looks very scripted. I mean, they just want perhaps just the key point that they are actually seeing to extract out of you rather than what you prepared. And obviously, you can write a whole essay on like the Palestine conflict, but that is not the point. The point is just the key aspects of whatever the demand of the question is. And if you ever feel like the answer is getting very lengthy, what I at times would do is, just try and reduce it with the help of an example rather than describing a particular concept or describing a particular event. If you just give examples, it can be self-explanatory so that you don't have to waste a lot of words on the same. Okay, and now coming to the third aspect of how you do this, and again, like coming back to the my 2021 experience, is in 2021, I had not even given one mock. Okay, so transition was, I think probably I became a little too complacent and a little too overconfident. In the previous attempts, I'd given mocks and it actually reflected. In 2021, because I went directly for the interview without giving mocks, my mindset perhaps was still in that mains mode. I was not being able to come out of the main shell. And subconsciously, my answers were becoming in that introduction, body, conclusion framework. So that is where I think I kind of made a huge mistake. So that is how the articulation works. I think briefly just giving an introduction in that aspect of articulation. Now, see, driving the interview, firstly, it's, if we cannot drive it smoothly, it's better we don't drive it. That's like a big caveat. That's like a big, like a warning sign. If it looks like you're driving an interview forcibly, then they'll be like, beta, interview hame lena hai, tumhe nahi kind of mindset kicks in. Okay, so it's better to be careful. So again, now if you take that warning away, how you drive the interview is, again, like don't make it forced. And secondly, you just nudge, you don't drive. Like the driving word is a very strong word. I would suggest you nudge. You basically, if like, I'll just give you an example from my 2000, like, I don't even know which interview was this, but so one of the members just asked, what do you see yourself in the future? Which areas you want to work? So I said something like education, environment, and he was like, oh, and since you're from economics, would you like to see yourself as a finance secretary? I said, no, I would like to see myself as a foreign secretary. He was like, why? And I was like, then, so, you nudge, then you said like, so my first preference is the foreign secretary. Then, so probably he did not read through my DAF, and it's okay. Most of them will not probably read through the nitty-gritties of the DAF. So I could have very well carried, like if given an option, who would not want to work in the finance ministry or be the finance secretary? So I could have easily answered also, I would like to see myself as the finance secretary and, just carry on with that thing. But I just stated that I would prefer so I did not state, sir, mera preference first foreign services, aap dekh lijiye. Nothing like that. I said, I would like to probably see myself. So you just nudge that. And then you ask, acha, your first preference is foreign service. So that way is you just organically nudge the interviewer. Secondly, when you nudge the interviewer, ensure that it is in the area of the question. Now, if he's asking a question about, just say something about the Indian economy, inflation. Okay, and probably you have no idea of economics, and that's perfectly fine. Not everyone has an idea about everything. Inflation, unemployment, he asks. Now, if you start nudging about there you want to put in like something like foreign policy, then it looks very forced. So try and nudge in the area of the question itself. If you're not comfortable with the inflation question, and if you're more just say comfortable with poverty or inequality in India, then you can somehow link poverty, inflation to inequality. But you cannot directly link inflation to foreign policy. I mean, like in the long run, there will be issue if you go into the nitty-gritties of imported inflation and all. But as a general, at a general studies level, it's better you link inflation, if the question is inflation, to something like inequality, if that is what you're comfortable with, so that the nudging is, very organic. Okay, that is point number two. You always nudge in the area of the question. Don't ever nudge beyond the ambit of the question. It has to be related, very strongly correlated with the question. Thirdly, if if you want to nudge in, say, something like I've seen many people nudge for hobbies and all, because that is something which everyone over prepares, right? Now, if they are asking about hobbies, you can hint that, like, let's say something about like watching. If some people just like watching cricket, okay, perfectly fine. If they ask about nitty-gritties of cricket, then you can hint that you basically watch rather than and like play like on a daily basis, or that you are more into watching rather than like analyzing the nitty-gritties of the game. So even if it is about the hobbies, even if you are over prepared, try and nudge so that it seems organic. Those are the three things that I would like to focus on. Okay, the 7 ABCD, the hobbies, prizes, sports, NCC, positions of leadership, extracurricular activities. So that is where I think a lot of us make short notes, prepare, go into the nitty gritties. Again, rule number one here is honestly, in my experience, except for a question or two, I was not asked much in these areas. Okay. But that doesn't mean you don't prepare. Obviously, you have to prepare. But for each topic, each hobby, I would not prepare more than a page. And I did that consciously because I realized that if you over prepare, irrespective of the question in that area, you will flood them with your information or knowledge. If it's your hobby that you're genuinely pursuing, you will give a satisfactory answer to the question. That is the level of confidence that we have to have in ourselves. If you tend to over prepare, if you are not comfortable with the level of information or knowledge that you have, please go ahead and prepare. But over preparing, the point that I bring is only because you should not flood them. Again, I reiterate, this is very important. Like, we tend to overlook this aspect, but they are not wanting to know everything that you know. Like, if you say, like, if anyone gives an example of a hobby, like just say running. Now, they will not want to know all that you know about running, and then you start preparing about who has 100-meter record, 200-meter record, Usain Bolt mein kitne mein kya tha, India ka fastest runner. Even if they ask who's India's fastest runner, you don't know, you can just say you don't know. Now, you cannot go into preparing who's India's fastest runner, who's South Asia's fastest runner, who's US ka fastest runner. That is what I mean by over prepare. Okay. Secondly, when they ask you, and if they ask you a question on these aspects, always, again, like we mentioned in the other questions, always only stick to the demand of the question. Because we have a lot of information in these areas, because that is where we tend to prepare or over prepare. Don't just blurt out everything that you know about that area. That is like, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, because that is the only issue that I've seen we face with 7 ABCD. Apart from that, I think we're very clear as to the areas, because that is something that we ourselves have written in the DAF.